Resilience has never been more prominent in these challenging times, and understanding how we can build resilience in people of all ages is becoming more apparent and more important. Shane Warren is a registered psychotherapist and certified clinical supervisor, and he joins us live right now. Hey Shane, how are you today?
G'day, how you doing?
Yeah, really well. You've been busy over the past couple of days. What have you been up to?
Oh, well, this, as you mentioned, resilience is one of the most crazy times at the moment, isn't it? Everyone wants to know about it. So that's what we've been up to. We've been sort of coaching and looking at resilience and seeing how people can grow and build it.
So tell us about that. You're right in the middle of dealing with resilience, teaching people about it, particularly at this time. What are you seeing at the moment? Is there room for optimism? Are people being resilient at the moment? What are you kind of experiencing?
Look, I think you're right. There is room for optimism, and optimism is one of those things we've always got to have some space for in life. But I think it's really important to keep in mind with that we need to have realistic optimism. So at the moment, we're in a time, aren't we, where, it's really hard to sort of, see the wood from the trees, to kind of really look at that perspective and kind of go, oh, wow, everything's going to be fine this time tomorrow, because we don't know what's going to happen, right? So we need to be realistic in that process, and we need to follow that quite strongly. But look, I always say to people, like, resilience is about two kind of key factors ultimately. It's about, one, the messages we tell ourselves, so our thinking style, what we actually experience, and what message story we say to ourselves, and two, how we choose to act upon that. So that's where we can really learn to grow and really look at some key factors. What message you're making out of this? What takeaways are you taking away? And what's next for you? That kind of process. And then what do you act on?
Yeah, cool. What, in terms of feedback from people that you are working with at the moment, maybe working with businesses, but particularly individuals, what feedback do you get? Do people understand what resilience is and how to build that within themselves? Where is that at the moment?
Look, I think it's a time when people have, like, resilience has been a trendy word, hasn't it, for about the last sort of, 5-10 years, right? Yep. So, it's been floating around a bit, but now people are really kind of going, well, what is this? And how do I get some to actually cope through this time? Because for the first time, I think, in a very long time, we are in a state of sort of social and collective uncertainty. So as a result of that, we're all sort of looking to each other. Now, one of the things we know with resilience in a normal time, so say, outside of the COVID crisis world we're in right now, if I have some bad things happen to me, I reach out to others, I lean towards others to actually get some strength to get through it. But we're all in a space at the moment of uncertainty. So, there's a danger there with that too, that where misery loves company, we can get into this kind of thought bubble of negativity, pessimism, uncertainty. So we need to actually be really conscious of that with each other and work around it. And I actually encourage people to really think about that and to actually always look at sort of hope stuff. Look for future sort of concepts of thinking and what might be some hope. And if we can collectively, each as a peer group, as friends, as families, as households, try and find some mantra stuff, some hope stuff to make next month look positive, then that's well worth latching onto.
Yeah, great. Let's talk in terms of science-based understanding, because a lot of that is now coming into what we know about resilience. So for people out there that don't know too much about, the science behind resilience, what's your experience there?
Look, one of those things that people often ask us that question all the time when we're doing sort of, training or coaching programs, is resilience something that we're kind of almost like DNA planted with and born with, or is it something we can grow? Now, look, the science is always backflipping around a little bit because there's some things that's really, really interesting. Some people just can cope better in bad situations than others. And one of the things we probably keep leaning towards, though, is that it's got a lot to do with kind of thinking styles and sort of the explanatory patterns, a bit like I said earlier about the message we have and what we tell ourselves. So that's kind of something that people are coached in and taught, some from a very early age and some from, when they actually have to learn it because, bad things happen, they learn to do it. So what we actually say to people is, yes, this is something that, you can acquire. So the science tells us all the time that to some level, really, your DNA makeup, your birth genetics don't limit your ability to develop resilience. And so we want to look at that. And we look at some key factors. Some of the real key things that come in all the time is, people who identify the fact that they're part of a collective, that they're part of a culture, part of a sort of support network, they actually tend to have natural resilience. So some of this individualism that's coming around and we're seeing at the moment, like we talk about, your anti-maskers, for example, and that sort of stuff, they're finding it hard to cope with this because they're not a part of a collective. Often they see themselves as an individual whose individual rights are being challenged. So they're finding it really hard. Whereas other people who say, well, I'm part of this greater good, greater community, I can move a little bit further forward. Other stuff we also know really is the concept, and we touched a bit earlier about optimism, pessimism. People who naturally have that kind of what we call realistic optimism tend to have stronger resilience factors and resilient mindset. In other words, they actually are really doing the good old cliche, hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, but living for what's happening in front of me now, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so there's sort of some things that are really strong in the resilience mind.
No, that's great. That's awesome information. Really interesting. I believe you're also a certified practicing hypnotherapist as well. And I know,
that's right.
People don't know. I think that's slowly starting to come into more of our understanding, not part of the norm yet. We're understanding. Tell us about that side of things, hypnotherapy and what people might need to, look at.
Look, one of the wonderful things about hypnotherapy is it's primarily designed to sort of, I suppose, relax what we call our critical mass index, which is the kind of stuff that we're all taught to actually, question, to challenge, to be a bit skeptical about stuff. So when you actually put somebody in a very deep, relaxed state, which is what hypnosis primarily is, we are actually empowering them to relax a little bit more and be open to new learnings, new insights, and to maybe actually get some sort of different wisdom that the critical mass factor is stopping them from doing. So, often like in my own world, my own private practice work, that's when I use it a little bit. When people are hesitant to shift further or to maybe be open to some concepts, we may actually do some, hypnotherapy around it. And that's like, look at the fact, say you want to give up smoking, so why hypnotherapy works really well with that, because it helps you kind of get rid of the critical mass dependency and crutch you've got to be implant and look at a new option, that sort of thing. So yeah, look, it's exciting times, and our neuropsychology and neurobalance sort of stuff is really opening us up to understand that that's about helping neuropathways retrain themselves.